Asia Partnership to the webinar on future of legal aid in South Asia for sexual violence offences against women and girls, lessons from the past 5 years. I work with Urja Trust. I'm Ankita, and it's an organization. Urja is part of the partnership. Urja has been working for almost a decade now for facilitating the rights of homeless young women and LGBTQ youth who are largely survivors of gender-based violence and violence of different forms on the basis of gender, caste, sexual identity, and other forms of marginalization. The South Asia Partnership is a group of organizations that works on issues related to ending sexual violence in South Asia. Since coming together, the South Asia Partnership has been evolving in its journey and thinking and its intent to pursuing changes to sexual violence laws and its implementation in South Asian countries. The partnership came into being based on a felt need and agreement for collective understanding and action on ending sexual violence as a result of research that was done and released by Equality Now and Dignity Alliance International, the link to which will be shared in the chat. The idea of partnership is to develop joint research and further the collective action and efforts wherever possible in various contexts, building upon the required emphasis and urgency on addressing sexual violence, its implementation and its redressal and its many interlinkages. The webinar today is first of the many initiatives of the partnership. While there is enough evidence to share that legal aid is a crucial and enabling factor of access to legal justice and is of vital importance, there are still many issues and barriers when it comes to the challenges that still remain when it comes to accessing the same. So through this webinar, we are hoping to bring back attention to some of these very crucial challenges. Also share good practices and solutions that are centering the needs and the journeys of survivors. We would love for you to be a part of hearing to the session and the guests. We have a diverse range of speakers, as you might have already seen in the agenda that has been shared with you. We also will be having an open session that for inputs and questions after the session as well during the webinar. I would like, before starting, I would just like to share a few housekeeping requests with everybody. I request you to kindly keep yourselves on mute, and if not, then the host may have to step in and put you on mute as well. Please feel free to ask questions if you have any on the chat, even during the course of the session. We will have time for more of an interactive dialogue and discussion later on. This webinar is being recorded for internal documentation purposes, and it will not be used for external sharing. We hope that is okay. And if not, please let us know if you have any concerns related to that on chat. A few pictures may be taken as well. So do let us know if you don't want your picture to be taken, or you can keep your videos off during the session. So yes, I would like to now hand it over to Naz to give us a context of legal aid in the region.
Thank you so much, Ankita, and hello to everyone attending today's webinar. So as Ankita has mentioned, my presentation today basically will attempt to give you all a South Asia sub-regional sort of overview of the status of legal aid and access to justice rights for women and girl survivors of sexual violence. I mean, we are all aware of the global estimates, right, that was published by WHO in 2021, which indicated that about 1 in 3 or 30% in other words of women worldwide have experienced either physical and or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner violence in their lifetime. Given that countries across South Asia report high rates of sexual violence against women and girls, and this is even more so during the COVID-19 pandemic and right now, these global figures roughly translate to 1 in every 2 South Asian women and girls who experience violence daily. So against this backdrop, it is actually quite worrying that the criminal justice system, our criminal justice system in this region is weak in comparison. And across the region, what we can see is the criminal justice system, it's characterized by implementation failures that lead directly to significant shortcomings in providing timely support to sexual violence survivors, which violate their access to justice rights. Now, we all know that access to justice rights means that victims of crimes have a right to free legal aid. And access to legal aid is essential to the right to a fair trial. And this is even more so for sexual violence survivors because legal aid ensures a couple of things. It ensures that there is legal representation for those with insufficient financial resources to cover the cost. It ensures that victims have a right to information, and this is on multiple aspects of support, which includes obtaining compensation, having access to shelters, psychological support, and also having access to specialized services for survivors of sexual violence, such as a trauma informed approach and counseling. But reflecting on our region, how much support are women and girls from this region actually getting? In South Asia, women and girls, while accessing the criminal justice system, are met with indifference and neglect at all levels. And this is often resulting in withdrawal of cases or leading to long delays in adjudication. Despite the pervasiveness of sexual violence across the region, the all South Asian countries contain protection gaps that leave women and girls vulnerable to sexual violence. And an example I can mention, our definitions of rape, for instance, it's not wide enough. It doesn't cover, offenses such as marital rape. So these protection gaps basically leaves lots of women and girls exposed to violence. In addition to these protection gaps, even where laws and policies do exist, they are not effectively implemented on the ground. And this includes the non implementation of laws on legal aid. Then we have the high levels of stigma, because stigma is attached to rape in our societies, and this often leads to non reporting or withdrawal of cases or settling outside of court. There are fear of repercussions such as violence, a threat to life, or social ostracization, which are other factors that hinder the reporting process. Yet, in all countries in South Asia, the victim witness protection schemes are either poorly implemented or there are insufficient shelters or safe houses, jeopardizing the safety of rape survivors and leaving them vulnerable to violence and threats from perpetrators and or their families. In addition, psychosocial care is rarely provided to survivors by the government. Only a few countries, and as examples, I can mention India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka here, have schemes for payment of compensation by the government to rape survivors. Even where provisions for payment of compensations exist, we know from our experiences that practical barriers often make compensation inaccessible for survivors. Women and girls from socially excluded communities are often at a higher risk of being subjected to sexual violence as compared to other communities. And this is due to the use of rape as a weapon of suppression, accompanied by a general culture of impunity for sexual violence, particularly from those from dominant classes, castes, or religions, which often leads to a denial of justice. Further, lack of social, political, and economic agency often hinders survivors of sexual violence from these socially excluded communities, and they are the ones who face severe obstacles to accessing justice. And these include Dalit women, women and girls from indigenous communities, women and girls with disabilities, etc. Then there is the problem of the tendency of justice system officials, namely police, and also outside the justice system, we have medical officers, we have public prosecutors, basically justice sector actors who are, part of like bribery and corruption. And these also poses challenges to accessing justice in rape cases. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened all of this. With the outbreak of COVID, many states failed to consider measures to combat gender-based violence against women as essential services and as basic human rights that should not be restricted. The CEDAW committee in its guidance notes on CEDAW and COVID-19 made the following observations, and I'm quoting: gender bias in the allocation of resources and diversion of funds during pandemics worsen existing gender inequalities. In one of its reports, UN Women noted that due to the crisis of COVID-19, many women's organizations, crisis centers, helplines, and shelters have had severe funding cuts and are struggling to continue service delivery. Civil society groups and legal aid organizations in the region were also affected by the lockdown and or the reallocation of resources. I believe these observations somewhat reflect our own experiences from this region. We also know that formal duty bearers, such as the police and judicial and actors and government ministry personnel, they all must be equipped with the knowledge and the tools to implement new laws and policies around violence against women and girls prevention effectively. As civil society organizations and legal aid organizations, we are playing essential roles in the region as we are the ones building the capacity and trying to shift the mindset of these institutions to address violence against women and girls in a less reactive and more proactive and preventive way to hold perpetrators accountable and also ensure access to justice rights for all. But is this responsibility just on civil society organizations and legal aid organizations? What I'm trying to say here is that governments must also take steps. Governments must make the prevention of sexual violence an integral part of their strategies on gender-based and sexual-based violence. And it is the governments who should embark on a multi-sectoral approach to work with civil society organizations and legal aid organizations and encourage more women to come forward to seek justice, all of which would go some way to addressing the social impunity for perpetrators of rape. But the question is, how do we address these issues on a regional level? So here I would just like to quote something that the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women has said. Detailed data is required to gauge the magnitude and dimensions of the problem. And by that, she means the effectiveness of the criminal justice and response mechanism and system. So we need more data to understand the baselines, to identify groups at high risk, to focus intervention and prevention efforts where they are needed the most, to monitor changes over time, and to assess the effectiveness of interventions to address the harms to victims of violence. So on a regional level, and we will hear more from you, but as a start, we also need to do a bit more evidence gathering. And as far as evidence gathering is concerned, Equality Now and its partners has worked on a report, and some of you might be familiar with it. It's titled Sexual Violence in South Asia, Legal and Other Barriers to Justice for Survivors. So we're basically continuing this conversation at the South Asia partnership level, which exists on ending sexual violence. And again, this webinar is one of those efforts to help us understand how far behind we are in ensuring access to justice rights for women and girls who are survivors of sexual violence. So with these thoughts, I end my presentation on the regional context setting, and I hand over to Julie, who will take us through the next part of this webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Naz, for giving us that context to legal aid services and provisions in the region. So the sense that we get is the lack of data, the need for evidence gathering, the role of the government in providing these services to everybody in the region, within the country's jurisdiction. So there is no better person than to respond to this than Mr. Mohan Sahabandhu, who is the chair of the Legal Aid Commission in Sri Lanka. And we will just be sharing his bio. You can see Mr. Sahabandhu has been very active in this space, and he has also worked at a regional level. So requesting Mr. Sahabandhu to really provide a little bit of insight to a regional level, the spaces, the opportunities, and possibly some of the strategies that we can utilize to be able to engage and push the dial throughout the region on this very important aspect for survivors of sexual violence. Over to you, Mr. Sahabandhu.
Right, thank you very much. First of all, I must thank you for inviting me to make a presentation at this August Assembly speaker. First of all, I think I do not know whether you all are aware of what's happening in Sri Lanka, where I'm the chairman of the Legal Aid Commission. And that is, and that this Legal Aid Commission has been established in 1978 by an Act of Parliament. Now, our act is somewhat unique in the sense that the commissioners of the Legal Aid Commission, 6 are appointed by the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, and only 3 by the Minister of Justice, so that we have total independence. We do not get any directives from any other person, any ministry, or any government institution other than the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. And I represent the Bar Association of Sri Lanka as the president of, as the chairman of the Legal Aid Commission. Now we are bound and we follow what is there in the Legal Aid Commission Act. We are there to provide legal aid services. All but the previous speaker said, we are doing it. Maybe on a, I won't say in that high scale that he spoke of, but we are doing that kind of thing. And we are involved in the normally day-to-day activity of a legal officer in the Legal Aid Commission. You will find that she will be handling cases like maintenance cases, divorce cases, domestic violence cases, or child adoption cases, and all cases, bail matters. But I must also confess that where our commission is concerned, we are more concerned, I'm sorry to say, it's more on the civil side. Of course, if you look at the other side, we do bail cases, we do appear in criminal matters, but the accent is more on the civil side. It's a lacuna that we have. It's not that we can't do, but apparently in Sri Lanka, what happens is in criminal cases, people would like to go to a lawyer to get the, I would say, the best advice and best representation, maybe because of that. But we are directly involved in the activities. Now, going on that, I totally agree with the previous speaker. I think she must be applauded for that. I have found, I have been the deputy president of the Bar Association and also the chairman of this commission for a long time. I have found that we have a lot of acts in place in Sri Lanka. We have a Domestic Violence Act. We have a Victims Protection Act. We have NCPA, that is the Child Protection Authority Act. All acts are in place. But to take a cue from the earlier speaker, there is no monitoring. We do it in the way that we do. There is no one to come and tell us that this is the way that it ought to be done. So what happens is that we have been to many seminars. We have also heard so many speakers, and we have heard suggestions and suggestions. But what happens is in Sri Lanka, we have societies, civil societies. I think Shamala is also there, I can see. They also, they try to come out with various aspects of this, of how to deal with these situations of legal aid to the deserving people. Well, though we have the act, now I must say in Sri Lanka, we know that universal franchise, we got it in 1931, and we are the oldest democracy in the Asian region. With all that, I will say as a chairman, we are lagged behind in the sense that we do not get the support of maybe where I'm concerned. I have been dealing with international organizations like the UNDP, like the UNODC, like the Asia Foundation. They come and we get together and we follow up matters and have programs to educate the people, the public, so that the people will be aware of their rights. It is and also where our constitution is concerned, legal aid is not a constitutional right. Although it is not a constitutional right, there is an act passed by Parliament which provides that legal aid be given to deserving people. Now, where we are concerned, the deserving people category will be the people who get less than Sri Lankan rupees, 40,000 rupees a month. If Sri Lankan rupees, 40,000 rupees a month. If he is able, if he cannot find, if his income is at that level, that person can approach the Legal Aid Commission. Ours is diversified, and we have in Sri Lanka, you will not believe that we have 86 centers doing legal aid, giving legal aid, doing legal aid services. 86 centers we have, each center being manned by a legal officer and the two assistants. And you find that most of the people in the areas, these poverty-stricken areas and people who cannot afford, they come to the Legal Aid Commission and we give them assistance. Another thing that we do here in Sri Lanka is that because of the fact that we are a statutory authority, because it's by an act of Parliament, we are a statutory authority, but state has absolutely no control. It so happens that we appear against the states in even fundamental rights cases. We do that very often. So that the people are aware of that. And because of the fact that we are a state authority, any information that we want from a state, we can detect very, very quickly and very in a more efficient way. We have that advantage. And generally, Legal Aid Commission, of course, I may not be on the topic of a sexual, what the topic is about, but it's about uh, offences against women. We have this, as I said, the Domestic Violence Act. It's in place, but I find that yesterday I was going through the Domestic Violence of India, which is highly exhaustive and extremely good. And I also find that we are in Sri Lanka, we do not have a constant view of these things. I agree with the earlier speaker, there is no reviewing. Now, without knowing, without going into the question again and again and trying to find out how this could be encouraged, the acts, I think in most of the countries were 100%. I do not know. But speaking about Sri Lanka, I would say that, well, we have an act, we do everything according to the act, but then there are new developments, there are new ways of looking at it, there are new agitations that come up, but we are not aware of those things. And I would say our NGOs are also not all that strong enough to lobby and campaign and get certain things done. Yeah, Sri Lanka is concerned, reading about these sexual violence offences, I say that the women in Sri Lanka are very well looked after on paper. We have all sorts of legislations protecting women. In fact, long before the CEDA, the Convention of Discrimination of Women, that was passed in 1992, we had acts covering women and looking after their interests, like this maternity benefits, shop and office, how long that they should work, all that we have had, and it is there on paper. But of course, as time goes on, new additions must come in, and we have brought in new amendments. So by and large, I would say that where the Legal Aid Commission of Sri Lanka is concerned, I think you all are not aware of what we do. It is as I always say, it's a hybrid organization where it is run by almost by the Bar Association, so that shows that we are independent and not funded by the government. We believe, when I say that we have 110 legal officers in the provinces. Each center is manned by a legal officer, and they are paid by the state. But that does not mean that they are paid because of the fact that they are paid by the state, that we bow down to anything that is being told to us by the state. No, we are independent. So practically speaking, where we are concerned, we do entertain cases where these offences against women and girls. We have that machinery. But what happens is that, take for example, there was in Sri Lanka some time ago, there was a bill that was brought in to say that any person arrested who does not have any legal representation, if he doesn't have, the police must take that person to the legal aid office in the region or in the province. So that from day one, from the moment that he or she is arrested, there is legal representation. But unfortunately, for better known reasons that I do not know, that was dropped. So that we do not have that facility in Sri Lanka. So what we must always, this gathering, the organization also see to it that from the moment of arrest, that there is representation, legal representation. There is a time gap of arrest and being produced in court within 24 hours. So many things happen during that period. So it is, we also wanted it that way, but unfortunately, yes.
Sorry, I think somebody's on mute. But sir, if I could also request you to take another 2 more minutes, please.
Yeah, it's true. No, before I don't think you all are aware of what the Legal Aid Commission of Sri Lanka is doing or what they propose to do. That's why I thought that I will inform you, all of you, about the Legal Aid Commission of what we are doing. So later on, we will go on to the review stage, which I appreciate what the earlier speaker said, reviewing and also the institutional framework must also be looked at. We only have these, we look at the acts, we look at the conventions, we look at the declarations. We'll have to see that those, what is there in the declarations and the conventions are being carried out. But I must say that we in Sri Lanka are concerned that we have the act, we do it, but there is no hard and fast sort of campaign to get these rights enforced. The rights have to be enforced somewhere or other. Even these new laws that are coming in, and Legal Aid Commission has taken this step forward of telling the Ministry and the Legal Aid Law Commission that corroboration in rape cases should be done away with. Why should in a rape case insist on corroboration? So we are in touch with them. So like that, when when we also take that step of informing the authorities concerned, but I would definitely like if these organizations, like the organization that we are now concerned with, steps up and then starts agitating and get even our acts amended to suit the modern days and modern times. We are lagging behind that. Our act is 1978, never been amended, but you will see that the idea is that even sexual violence is concerned, not very many cases come up even to the Supreme Court. Now, I am a practitioner in the Supreme Court, but not very many cases. But in India, you know about this Visakha's case, where that has revolutionized. And another thing that we must also talk of, or we should talk of, is sexual harassment in the office, employment. So that is very rampant. Now it is getting more rampant, I would say. And organizations like you also step in and see that, force the governments and the organizations to see that it is stopped and bring in new laws. I'm also from my side is trying to get even the certain sections amended. So like that, I think it's very good gathering where we can learn a lot. We all the people, as I see, are mostly academics. I think I may be the only practicing lawyer here, but what I want this organization to do is to see that these things are passed down, and then just do not for a moment end with this conference, share views, but don't stop there, and to see that it flows down, and then what we decide here be implemented. Otherwise, what happens is that we go to the very numerous seminars, we talk and discuss, and we talk till the cows come home, but then following up is not there. So I want you all to at least just say that we will follow it up. Bring pressure on the parties, pressure on state, pressure on maybe the authorities like the Legal Aid Commission in Sri Lanka to get the law amended and to see that we are in so that our concepts are materialized. So I will stop at that and we'll come back later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sahabandhu. I think we are definitely not going to stop here. This, in fact, for us is a starting point only. The idea is that we are able to develop the thinking, the suggestions that esteemed panelists like you and the others, there might be more in the audience who are practicing lawyers, organizations who provide legal aid. So we are hoping that all these suggestions will be brought together in some kind of a report, adding to the evidence that Naz was talking about earlier. And then we will be looking at opportunities to engage both at a national level, at a regional level, and maybe even at an international level if the opportunity and the space does come up. So thank you very much for those ideas. I think it kind of resonates with us quite a bit in terms of what the challenges are and the breadth of the work that we need to cover when we're talking about legal aid provision, services, information, and awareness amongst people. So I will now invite Miss Melissa Upriti to share her views. Unfortunately, Ms. Upriti was not able to be present here because of the time difference. So she has sent in her recorded thoughts and suggestions to take this forward. As you might know, Ms. Upriti has been a former member of the Working Group on the Discrimination Against Women and Girls, and she is currently with the International Commission on Jurists and is the Regional Director for Asia Pacific. So we will hear her, and just before we hand it over, I would request all participants or audience present here to make use of the question and answer button or share your thoughts, your questions in the chat box. We are hoping that we'll be able to cover it. Either the panelists will cover it or we would be able to cover it during our question and answer. So please do write your thoughts, questions in either in the question and answer or in the chat. Thank you, and over to Ms. Upriti. Shruti, we can't hear the volume.
Okay, just a sec.
I guess technology always challenges us, despite the fact that we've been on Zooms for the past 3 years, but it still does. Should I try and share maybe, or is it a matter of some setting that's not enabling us?
Yeah, let me just try once more, or you could try next.
Thank you for inviting me to contribute to today's discussion. Strengthening women's access.
Shruti, it's she's based out of Bangalore in India, and it's been raining there. So we're hoping that she hasn't dropped off by any chance.
Are you not able to hear it still?
It's not playing.
Oh, it's not playing? I'm so sorry. Like you said, no matter how many times we practice, I think this just happens.
Thank you for inviting me to contribute to today's discussion. Strengthening women's access to legal aid, especially for those who have experienced violence, is an important focus of the International Commission of Jurists' efforts to advance the rule of law and access to justice for women. Several international instruments provide useful guidance on the provision of legal aid, such as the 2013 United Nations Principles and Guidelines on Access to Legal Aid in Criminal Justice Systems, and the CEDAW Committee's General Recommendation 33 on Women's Access to Justice. They emphasize the importance of institutionalizing systems of legal aid which are responsive to the needs of women. A crucial element in ensuring that justice systems are accessible to women is the provision of free or low-cost legal aid, advice, and representation in judicial and quasi-judicial processes in all fields of law. Services must be provided in a manner that do not cause re-victimization, and confidentiality must be maintained. Additionally, governments are required to take measures aimed at enabling women's access to legal aid, which include, among other things, conducting information and awareness-raising programs and developing partnerships with competent non-governmental providers of legal aid and training paralegals to provide women with information and assistance in navigating judicial and quasi-judicial processes and traditional justice systems. In 2013, the United Nations Principles and Guidelines on Access to Legal Aid in Criminal Justice Systems were adopted, which specifically call for an active policy of incorporating a gender perspective into all policies, laws, procedures, programs, and practices relating to legal aid. Where possible, ensuring the availability of female lawyers to provide representation, and the availability of translation services and access to internet and other information and communication technologies. Legal aid services must be designed to create access to specialized services such as rape crisis centers and shelters. Just how seriously this is taken by international legal bodies is demonstrated by the fact that, in the case of AT versus Hungary, the CEDAW committee deemed the failure to provide shelters as a breach of the convention. Now, women may be more willing to discuss their health issues with medical providers rather than disclose that they've been subjected to violence by filing a complaint with the police. The World Health Organization has issued guidance to medical providers that includes helping victims access legal information and resources. A large number of women experience violence in the world of work. The International Labour Organization's Violence and Harassment Convention, number 190, adopted in 2019, requires governments to ensure that victims of gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work have effective access to gender-responsive, safe, and effective complaint and dispute resolution mechanisms, support, services, and remedies. Employers should be required to integrate measures in social protection schemes that will allow victims to utilize legal aid services, for example, by providing paid time off for victims of violence to pursue legal avenues of recourse, and they must offer protection against retaliation as well. Now, looking ahead with an eye to improving access, it is important to see what action can be taken. Some of the most common barriers to the creation of high-quality and gender-responsive legal aid services, such as harmful gender stereotyping, which often manifests in a failure to take crimes against women seriously, the lack of technical and financial investment in services, and weak referral systems and institutional linkages, have been documented by international women's human rights mechanisms, namely the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, and the CEDAW Committee during their country visits and reviews, and they have made recommendations to governments which require follow-up. Members of civil society, women's rights organizations, and judicial actors who want to improve access to legal aid for women in context-specific situations can use these recommendations to press for improvements in the provision of legal aid, arguing that the government would be in breach of their obligations under international law if they failed to do so. Nepal and the Maldives are two countries that come to mind, where these issues have been examined recently by special procedures, as well as Afghanistan. As for useful regional frameworks, in 2022, judges from 6 countries in South Asia adopted the Bangkok General Guidance for Judges in Applying a Gender Perspective, also known as the BGG, which alerts actors from across justice systems and at all levels to the fact that harmful gender stereotypes, gender biases, and unequal power relations promote inequality and perpetuate discrimination, which undermine access to justice for women. These guidelines contain specific recommendations for creating a gender-friendly infrastructure that ensures access to justice for women, including those who are victims of violence, taking an intersectional approach. The guidelines recognize the importance of using modern technology to facilitate access, especially in situations of crisis. Another barrier that frequently hinders women's access to justice is the stigma associated with the criminalization of certain acts, which represent the context in which many women experience violence. I'd like to draw your attention to the 8th March Principles for a Human Rights-Based Approach to Criminal Law, proscribing conduct associated with sex, reproduction, drug use, HIV, homelessness, and poverty, which were developed with the input of jurists from South Asia. These principles were launched this year on International Women's Day and can be used to assess the role of stigma in undermining access to justice, including legal aid and the provision of quality legal aid, as well as to develop practical strategies to address stigma. Finally, we know that online gender-based violence has increased dramatically, while our ability to prevent and address the harms has not. The ICJ's OGBV checklist, published earlier this year, identifies, among other things, the need to increase the understanding of the harms associated with online gender-based violence, or OGBV, among actors in the justice sector, as well as how to identify and respond appropriately to the specific need of women victims or survivors of violence, and how to avoid re-victimization through the use of stereotyping language and the gendered causes and impacts of online gender-based violence, which are all too common. The BGG, the 8th March Principles, and the OGBV checklist were developed by the ICJ, or the International Commission of Jurists, in partnership with jurists from across the region. These tools are grounded in international law and informed by national legal frameworks and practice. As such, I would like to encourage everyone to think about how they might be used to strengthen the provision of legal aid and ensure women's access to justice in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Ms. Zupriti has really shared about the regional spaces that we can use, the guidance and the principles that are there. Naz has been pasting on the chat the conversation that she's had just now with us, her inputs. I will also be pasting some of the links that Ms. Zupriti has shared with us for those of us who are interested in reading about it and engaging in that process. But we are a little short of time, so I will not take more or provide more insights into this. I will take this opportunity to hand it over to Shamala so that we can go to the next segment of this webinar. Please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A or on the chat, and we shall try and respond. We do notice that there is one question there, and we will try and see if we can respond to it at some point of time. Over to you, Shamala.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to moderate this session. I think at the outset, I'd just like to say that we are talking here about a survivor-centered or survivor-centric legal aid process. And I think we need to be focusing on that. In terms of how this particular session will go, is that we have 4 speakers. Julie has kindly consented to put the bios in the chat, so I don't have to worry with any of that. But we have experiences from different countries here, and we will each speaker will speak for 7 minutes. I just want to make a few comments at the outset. In fact, I think Naz mentioned a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about, but I want to turn some of her very valid reflections into questions. And, so that we can reflect on these questions as we go through this session and into the rest of the webinar. I think the first thing we need to find out or think about is, what does survivor-centric legal aid entail? What does it mean? We say it very loosely, we use these terms all the time, but what does it actually mean for sexual violence survivors? Does it operate in a vacuum? Naz mentioned this, and I think for me too, the fact that we need a whole plethora of support systems available when legal aid is, if legal aid is to operate effectively. For example, service providers need to be good. We need shelters, mental health services, good mental health services, support of government officials, law enforcement officials, and the legal framework that Mr. Sahabandu spoke about. What about the quality of legal aid? And I think here I would like to place emphasis on this. Although Mr. Sahabandu did say that the Legal Aid Commission in Sri Lanka doesn't deal with criminal aspects generally. I think the point being that the lawyers that who are representing the clients at the Legal Aid Commission need to have a very good understanding, a conceptual understanding of sexual violence. And the reason I say that is also because there could be cases, civil cases, where there's a violence element. For example, in maintenance, in land cases, in other civil cases, you may have an element of violence also showing up. And therefore, you need to have a very good understanding among, an overall understanding among the lawyers on what this actually means. I also would like to bring in the whole aspect of the LGBT community and the fact that, they need to be taken into consideration as well. As you know, in most of our countries, although there are some of us that are more advanced than others, the LGBT communities remains hidden, and their access is even worse than other women. The other is the increased access to quality legal aid services, and I'm talking here mainly focusing on access and the fact that we need to make sure that, for example, mobile services, the availability in DS officers at divisional level, at district level, these are things that need to be thinking about. Mr. Sahabandu, I'm talking again about Sri Lanka, the fact that you mentioned, I think that there were 86 centers. How do they operate? Do people actually access them? Is it enough? I think these are another question for reflection. Similarly, I would also like to bring in the whole question of legal education and the fact that we need to be institutionalizing legal aid in legal education. And that is an aspect that I think Mrs. Sahabandu and I have had conversations about previously as well. And the fact that, I I used to teach at the law faculty in Colombo, and we did have a legal aid center at that time, I think, and now it's back. It's back. But the fact is that we need to be providing these services and looking at increasing access, but it needs to be institutionalized. And I think that is another aspect. The other is the intersection between paralegalism and legal aid. How do we make that connect? The other, I will just mention this briefly so that we can just think about these things as we go on. I don't want to go in too much. We have esteemed panelists here that will expand on these issues. The other is resource allocation. And is it the role of civil society to advocate for increased budgets? Mr. Sahabandu briefly mentioned this, and I agree with him. The fact that we need to be asking for increased budgets for legal aid. I mean, although, many of these lawyers do this work, almost as philanthropy or altruism, I think it's really important that, they need to be paid well in this current context. The other is the nuanced approach that we need for legal aid services during crisis, different times of crisis. For example, the pandemic and the lack of accessibility that we had, especially during lockdowns. How do we figure that out? Also in times of conflict, the differences, what kind of services do we need for conflict-related sexual violence survivors? Another aspect to consider. And lastly, how do we look at which agency should be responsible? Which agency should be responsible for taking the lead on providing seamless legal aid for sexual violence survivors. I will leave it there. And something that has struck me and has stayed with me right throughout my legal career and in my work in civil society is Justice Bhagwati, the very well-known Supreme Court justice in a public interest litigation case, mentioned access to justice is the most basic human right. And for me, this is extremely important. So although we may not have constitutional provisions, this is what he read into that particular case. And I think this is something that has reverberated for me in my legal career and in my activism. So without further ado, I will go into just introducing and asking questions from the different panelists in terms of their views on particular aspects that we are covering here in this webinar. So I'd like to invite Manisha Biswas from BLAST, Bangladesh, to give us your opinion. In your experience of providing legal aid in Bangladesh, please share two aspects that have improved the quality and outreach of legal aid in terms of information about its existence, of its the fact that it's available, and service delivery of legal aid provisions. If you can stick to the 7 minutes, Manisha, that would be fantastic. And Julie will be there to put the brakes. Thank you. Over to you, Manisha.
Thank you so much, Shamla, for giving me the floor. So I have prepared a presentation here to address all of your questions. If it is possible to show here. So I am basically working with the BLAST Bangladesh Legal Aid and Services Trust. Can I have the first slide, please? I have the first slide. Before going into my whole presentation, I would like to focus on what BLAST is and what they actually work. So in 1993, BLAST was being formed with the object to dedicate the legal aid to the poor people who are not going to the court because of their financial supports. And there is one interesting fact about the BLAST is that before any government would form any national legal aid or services organizations, BLAST is the former organization in the context of Bangladesh to provide legal aid services to the people who are not being unable to seek the justice to the courts. Till now, there are 1,12,743 cases who are being mitigated by the support of legal aid, and which is provided by the BLAST. And we have 2,600 of pro bono lawyers who are working under the umbrella of BLAST and working with a good cause for the society. So this is a kind of overview from the BLAST, and onto the next slide. So to address the questions that we had and that for the webinar, I will be in my next presentation. I will be briefly presenting what actually BLAST offer to address these paralegals and legal systems as a breach, and how we come up with some innovative approaches so that people from all over the country, people who are being marginalized, can seek justice and come up to us or being vocal about their rights, particularly when they are dealing with GBV and sexual violences. We actually basically do as in terms of inclusion. So the paralegal is one of the crucial strengths for the BLAST. Since our beginning of our journey, we are working with the paralegals. We basically see our country through the paralegals' eyes, and we basically work through the paralegals' eyes. So what we do is that the paralegals focus on so there will be two activities, which would be one legal aid activities, and which is the proactive legal aid. So when a paralegal does a proactive legal aid, she or he basically go door to door and supports these victims, supports the survivors, and they basically follow up these cases. What are the positions of the cases in the court or in their family? How they are surviving? How they are rehabilitating from their post trauma? So these are the techniques we use. These are the techniques our paralegals use to basically keep track on the survivors in these terms. So and we had us one thing called mobile legal hub and mobile legal clinic, where people used to go door to door. If there is any kinds of legal supports they would need, they seek for the informations, the where do they go, where will these kinds of service they will have. So these kinds of informations are being provided by our paralegals. On to the next slide. So when the paralegals are doing this, they basically provide the legal counseling to the survivors, to the victims as well. And when they are on the court, they kind of try to speed up the procedure for the victims, since we all know that how traumatizing a court experience would be for a victim or for a survivor. And what most important thing they do is that they aware the community if there is any new law came up, or the basic legal rights, the basic legal remedy they would be aware of, they has to aware of. So what they do is the paralegals are basically aware the communities about the basic rights and the services that available in the country context. On to the next slide, we will see some innovative approaches and how we gather these kinds of services into one platform, and how we amplify our voice through this. So what BLAST actually do is that we outreach to the like-minded people, like-minded platform that are working with the same objects. As you can see, there are four platforms. First one is Rape Law Reform Coalition. We basically on these coalitions trying to amend the whole rape definition as it is from the medieval era, from the British era as it was. And there are so many things that is unaddressed totally, as Nazapu have rightly said, that there is no marital rape definitions. There is no the transgender who are in the verge of being raped. There is no provisions for that as well. So we are trying to build an inclusive definition under this coalition, and we are trying to build a progressive and a very friendly with the context of Bangladesh, trying to build these kinds of coalitions, so that the people who are being victim of this rape, they could seek help from the other organizations under these coalitions. And we have this citizens initiative against domestic violence. Basically we trying to so there will be a rule on domestic violence, and we are communicating with the governments to amend the rules and to be more friendly with the women in terms of domestic violence. And the third one is children's perspective, and we basically focused on ending psychological and physical punishment in the institutions. So what we do that recently we arranged a press relief, and we prepared 7 demands on the how institution would be more friendly for the children, for the students, and how counseling would be a better idea to support students who are being victim of trauma and who are being bullied in these institutions. And fourth one is very much important and very much timely for our country context, since we as a woman and or as a children are very much likely to face online violences and harassments in our country, and very much little we know about procedures and where we be going to seek help. So this platform is formed with 12 other organizations and helping women and children who are, facing these kinds of violence, facing these kinds of cyberbullying. On to the next slide, we will see that how we work with these coalitions. So basically, we are blessed as a co-convener,
Sorry,
direct and
if you
regulate
could
this.
wind up in
Yes.
2 minutes, please. I'm so sorry.
Okay, sure. Yes, sure. So, so on to the next slide, we will be seeing the innovative approaches, and so apart from building coalitions, we have legal aid camps, as I have mentioned earlier, where the penal lawyers, paralegals, visit from across the countries, and they aware people about the laws, about their basic rights, and they set some booths in there, and where people could get informations about what they're facing the problem and how they could get remedy in there. So we also provide IEC materials, and we also provide our helpline number, which are available 24/7 in our country, so that people could get help via this helpline. On to the next slide, we will be seeing that we have developed an app called Shromik Jigasha. If we can see that slide. So the app is basically for the workers, and which the app basically keep track on the maternity leaves and keep track on the payroll, as we know that our government sectors workers, who are basically almost the women, face backlash in their working environment. So this app is basically would come up with us for us to keep track on these workers' rights, and they could get easily seek services and advices from the blast through these live as messages. So this is kind of the feature we long for. So on to the next slide, we will be seeing how we are being inclusive for the people who are being marginalized. So in this term, we had one project named Shokhi project. So we basically worked on some slums as a hub of legal clinic, where people could come and they would take sessions about the laws, take sessions about their rights, and where people we actually also work with the skill developments, and such as swing training, technical training that they got. So from that project, we had a very good response from the slums, and people are come up to us with their problems, and they actually being vocal, and women especially who wouldn't say who wouldn't talk much, they come to us and they seek help for their domestic violences and the backlash they faces in the family. So and we also work with the gender diverse community, with the CBOs, who are basically led by the gender diverse communities. I think that's most interesting work we have ever done with. So with developing the skills of CBOs, we trying to go via the CBO, trying to go to the gender diverse communities and we get in touch with them and letting them know that we are there to help them. So this is kind of it from the blast from us, that what we do mostly. So if there is any question, if there is anything, I would happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha, for providing us with an overview of BLAST work and the innovative approaches that you're using in your work. I won't give any comments in the interest of time. We will go on to the second speaker, who is Sushama Gautam. She's an advocate from Forum for Women Law and Development based in Nepal. Sushama, the question I have for you is, in the experience of your organization in Nepal, what has led to a greater focus on inclusion and intersectionalities in providing legal aid? And was this a response to challenges that were faced in providing legal aid? Over to you, Sushama. Thank you.
Thank you, Samara. Good afternoon, you all, and thank you for providing me this opportunity to share our experiences in this forum. Forum for Women Law and Development, which we call FWLD in short, has been providing legal aid and assistance since the early years of its establishment. The major beneficiaries of legal aid are related to the issues of legal identity and sexual and gender-based violence. Even though there are many cases where these issues stand independently, FWLD has encountered many cases where these two issues had close interrelation. For instance, there are many cases where a pregnant woman who is often subjected to assault, unwanted sexual relation, forceful exile from the house, and many other instances escape to their maternal home for security, eventually finding out that their husband is not in contact anymore, giving rise to the issue of legal identity. FWLD has also acknowledged the facts that there is diversity within the people and there can be diverse experiences, and has adopted the approach of intersectionality, where marginalized groups, persons with disabilities, minorities, those left by husbands, and others within the group are also recognized. During the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by the lockdown and prohibition period, FWLD started its legal helpline service, through which it provided legal assistance and legal counseling over telephone and email. A total number of 525 gender-based violence survivors reported cases and got legal assistance. Out of them, 495 are women, 28 men, and 2 belong to gender and sexual minorities community. Some gender-based violence survivors made multiple calls to further discuss the issues and to share update their cases. Of the total gender-based violence survivors, their caste, ethnicity record shows that 109 were Brahmin, 134 Kshetris, 177 indigenous, 68 Dalits, 29 Madhesis, 7 Muslims, and 1 other. Out of the gender-based violence survivors, 8 reported their identity as person with disability. The types of cases for which legal counseling was provided include domestic violence, sexual violence, polygamy, mental torture, cyber violence, homicide, and human trafficking. On this journey of providing legal aid, FWLD has also come across various challenges. For instance, FWLD provided legal aid in a case where minors with intellectual disability living in state-led orphanages were raped continuously by the ex-student as well as the officials working there. The fact that these minors were living in state-led orphanage, which is called Bal Mandir, and defendants being the employees of the same Bal Mandir, had made this case more sensitive. The most difficult challenges in this case was that those minors were taught by the perpetrators that those instances of rape and harassment were forms of expression of love. FWLD supported the survivors from the beginning of the case and pleading in all district court, high court, and Supreme Court. And I represented the survivors on behalf of FWLD. Finally, with FWLD's continuous and consistent effort for 10 years, the Supreme Court of Nepal on 1st October 2023 gave a very crucial verdict in favor of these minors, imprisoning the perpetrators and providing compensation to the minors. This this is continuous, and FWLD has also been evolving to provide better legal aid services. So to make sure legal aid services are accessible in this modern age of technology, FWLD has developed a mobile app and upgraded the app with the support of Equality Now with new features where the contact information of the government as well as non-government agencies such as legal aid committees were made available. The app provides various kinds of legal information on various themes, ranging from gender-based violence, legal identity, anti-trafficking, sexual and reproductive health rights, disaster management, etc. FWLD has also developed infographic videos on the various issues of GBV in a very simple language to make it reader friendly, and has made videos in multiple languages with sign language to make it more inclusive. I think this is all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushama. I think when the discussion is being taken forward, all of these comments from the panelists will be taken into consideration when as we go on with the webinar. We'll go on now with the third speaker. The third speaker is Smriti Hinocha, who is a Director Partnerships at Jansahas. And Shruti, Smriti, I'd like to ask you, in your experience, what has led to better engagements between different stakeholders in delivering legal aid, particularly in resource allocation and utilization? Over to you, Smriti.
Thank you, Shamla. I'll just briefly tell about Jansahas. Jansahas has been working over 2 decades to provide support to survivors of sexual violence. In 2019, we had organized a dignity march, which covered across 26 states and reached over to 5,000 survivors, raising issues faced by survivors of sexual violence and making recommendations to the government. Over the years, Jansahas has been working with various stakeholders like the State Legal Service Aid Authority, the District Legal Service Aid Authority, and other government bodies and officials, partnering with them for sensitizations and training programs. We also run a legal helpline providing legal counseling, legal aid, connecting survivors to their local organization, as well as partnering with a number of organizations across India working on the issues of violence against women, and particularly issues of women coming from marginalized communities. Over the years, Jansahas has supported a number of survivors and has contributed in their journey from survivors to survivor leaders. And that we see has now has been taken forward, where survivors are now advocating for their rights. In India, we particularly see that equal justice and free legal aid is enshrined under the Article 39 of the Constitution of India. And to achieve this objective, the Legal Service Aid Authorities Act 1987 ensures that women, children, survivors of trafficking, persons with disabilities, members of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other marginalized communities are in particular among the categories eligible for free legal aid in the country. The National Legal Service Aid Authorities, the State Legal Service Aid Authority, the District Legal Service Aid Authority, and a number of law colleges and institutions have been providing legal aid to specifically women and children, and have also set up legal aid clinics at village level for easy accessibility. Now, this has been further strengthened by appointment of panel lawyers. So each district has a list of lawyers who are impaneled for easy accessibility and for women to get access to them. There are also now we have seen appointment of paralegal volunteers who work with the survivors and with the institutions in providing information, counseling, assistance with documentation, and also acting as a bridge. Similarly, at district level, we have seen a number of initiatives taken where civil society organizations, member of civil society organizations are appointed as support persons specifically for cases of child sexual abuse. And these support persons play a very important role. Usually we see that the child and their family get lost during the entire in their journey to avail justice. So these support persons actually provide that kind of play that facilitation role, where they accompany them to hospitals, accompany them to police stations if required, for medical, accompany them to court. So these initiatives that have been taken have really helped in the whole journey to avail justice. Also, a number of initiatives have been taken by the National Commission for Women and other state women commissions to provide legal aid, as well as set up mediation centers, partner with judicial academies and other departments to organize regular gender sensitization and awareness program, and highlight issues of violence against women. There have been multiple trainings which have been done on laws, and also to have this survivor-centric approach. So a number of workshops are conducted by various courts, where as resource persons, members of the communities are invited to present their what challenges do they face while accessing legal aid. And this has really helped for various officials to get that to be sensitive on such issues. We cannot ignore the role the civil society organizations have played in India. A number of civil society organizations have also stepped up and are providing legal aid to survivors, social workers, pro bono lawyers, who bridge the gap to ensure that quality legal aid is provided. A number of political parties as well as governments have also have set up various initiatives to ensure that legal aid is provided through their offices. We have also seen that a number of good judgments have come out by various courts, which ensures that quality legal aid is given. Recently, this year, we see that various schemes have come up by the Department of Justice for accessing justice, which is like they have also set up helplines at Gram Panchayat level, and these helplines provide pro bono legal services. Tele-law services have been started, where over 1 lakh Gram Panchayats in 77 districts can access these services on call. There have also been partnerships with law schools to ensure that legal aid is provided. And though we have seen over the years that the budget, the NALSA budget being reduced, but state contributions over the years has been increased. So yeah, that was from my side. Thanks, Shamla.
Thank you, Smriti, for that. I think all of these, there's a lot that you have brought up for discussion, and we can go into these details during the discussion. Last but not least, we have Sashi Stephen from Sri Lanka, from the Women's Development Center in Sri Lanka. And Sashi, hi Sashi, just to ask you, in your experience, what are the 2 aspects that need to be centered on during crisis, be they economic, political, and or civil unrest, or in public health emergencies? What are your views on this? Over to you, Sashi.
Thank you, Shamala, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. I think briefly I would like to say about Women's Development Center. We are based in Kandy, Sri Lanka. And we work mainly on gender equality and women empowerment. Our work mainly focuses on gender-based violence and working with survivors of violence and providing legal aid and support, shelter for survivors of violence, and building knowledge and awareness to community. We work with the networks, district level networks, and we partner with them and building awareness, and also working with the marginalized groups, especially the disabled. And also we try to look at it in a holistic approach of economic empowerment. So this is WDC. But on the topic that I was given, and in my experience, Sri Lanka has gone through some of the worst emergencies that has caused the setback of the current situation. When I go back a little bit, 30 years of armed conflict, the tsunami, political, ethnic unrest, drought, flooding, landslides, and in the recent past, the COVID, and now we are faced with one of the worst economic crises, affecting not only the poor, but the middle class as well. So looking at all these crises and considering all these, my personal experience in a humanitarian context, I believe that access to services and access to justice are the biggest challenge most affected people encounter. All emergencies have its own form of affecting people differently. But what are the main common factors are the access to services and access to justice. May it be physical, mental, or psychological, including economic. Right to have the access to services and justice during emergencies are fundamental human rights. Access to justice is not a priority during emergency, as the focus is mainly on safety and security. In most instances, injustice happen against women and children, especially girls, in unsafe condition in the transitional stage. The complaint mechanism focusing on gender-based violence is not prioritized. This needs to be in place and strengthened during crisis. Building knowledge and awareness on human rights is one of the areas needs to be considered and strengthened in a humanitarian or in a crisis situation. Most people are not aware of their fundamental rights. This causes a lot of confusion during crisis. For example, in multilingual country context, as Asian context is mostly that, in all information and services must be impartial. All ethnic, religious groups without partiality be able to access services equally. This is relatively there's a large gap in the service provision due to lack of information in different languages. So this is one of the reasons why equal opportunity is not given. In most vulnerable communities feel they are dependent on the duty bearers or service providers. The vulnerability is there depending on, so the cultural rather than focusing through a rights perspective. So most of them feel so vulnerable that they depend as a charity, they're receiving charities. Reluctant to report to authority in mainly due to fear of being judged, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. Lack of confidentiality is one of the reasons why they don't complain, being partial, unequal treatment, or injustice. In order to avoid, I think community should be more educated in this area, as violence against women and especially girls or children is very common during crisis. The importance of use of helpline and hotline, because most of the time the helpline during emergencies, the hotline, and there's a huge, so many digits numbers, and a lot of them don't remember those. Is investing in these helplines and hotlines that has to be accessible 24 hours and properly resourced and address different needs of crisis situation to access services and legal aid. Easily to remember number. And most importantly, people should have confidence in the mode of communication. And also there should be an enabling environment should be created in the close proximity of where they are staying, ensuring safety and security in refuge or in transitional process to report incidents of violence against women and children. Access to legal services, legal aid, and legal provision should be strengthened. Because I think Mr. Sahabandhu very clearly, I think he was very honest about it. And the services provided in Sri Lanka is not very organized. And I think during crisis time, I think these are some of the things that we need to consider. The referral pathways needs to be adequately invested. Resources to address different needs of the elderly, the disabled, women, the pregnant women, and children. Investing on capacity building of disaster management centers at local and national level with experienced and knowledge, dedicated personnel with gender sensitivity to deal with human needs in order to reach maximum services. There are a lot, you get a lot of volunteers during emergencies, but I think volunteerism is not taken into consideration. I think that's one of the things that I would recommend here. And training and capacity building to use social media platforms responsibility, because media plays a major role during crisis. In this area, like protocol has to be followed to avoid bias reporting. Investing on public knowledge and awareness through social media should be considered. I feel most importantly, maintaining continuity of the service delivery, investing on task force and including policy framework. I think it should be in place. These are some of the areas. I think I wanted to be very short and sweet because I'm dealing with only the crisis area. So I think the importance of access to services and access to justice in crisis situation has to be in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sashi. I think you gave a very good brief, like a synopsis of your work and your recommendations already. Thank you so much for that. The next segment here would be very quickly in terms of, before we go on to discussion, I would like to ask the four panelists to give us one recommendation that you would provide to ensure that the next 5 years of legal aid services will move towards a survivor-centered approach. Just one a short 1 minute recommendation, because we're already over time, to the audience here on what your one recommendation would be to ensure that you're moving towards a survivor-centered approach. Shall we go with Smriti? No, we would go with Manisha first, and we go in the same order. So Manisha, over to you.
Thank you for the question. So as per my knowledge, as per the context of Bangladesh, as we see that very broadly these things are being stigmatized in here in Bangladesh. And when we say a rape victim, we use the word is dhurshita, which is a very negative in our context. we still use these kinds of words. We still think that this is her problem. This is the first thing we say, that this is whom to blame. So I think what we from the survivor centric approach, what we are looking for is to sensitize the institutions, particularly the education institutions, and the law enforcement persons who are dealing with them directly, and who basically further traumatize the victim in these kinds of cases. So what we basically are would be the recommendation is that to sensitize the education institutions first. So when students from their deep rooted thoughts, when they see persons who are dealing with this problem, the first thing, they don't think that this is her problem only, and he is the one whom to blame. So and the other thing would be for when the police are dealing with these things, when police are listening to these incidents, they don't get judgmental to the woman, that why she was being late to the home, why she was not home at early, and why she dressed up like that. This is kind of, she is asking for it. So these kinds of questions that were being put at thousands of times when a woman got these kinds of problems. So my recommendations would be to sensitize these kinds of institutions first. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. So Shama, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Shamala. FWLA has been constantly advocating that legal aid is not limited to providing legal aid to individuals, but is the main pillar of access to justice as well. Hence, FWLA also did policy advocacy for formulation of legislation on legal aid, and there is a special law related to legal aid, that is Legal Aid Act in Nepal. The Constitution of Nepal has also guaranteed legal aid as a fundamental right, and the national policy on legal aid and the policy on unified legal aid have also been formulated. So these policies also include promotion of victim-centered legal aid. Therefore, the de jure mechanism to ensure legal aid has been established. But individuals who need legal aid should also be able to access the services in de facto. And in order to ensure that they have access to legal aid services by state and non-state actors, FWLD also has app which allows them to access information, contact of legal aid service providers, and individuals can also contact FWLD for legal aid through the app. Hence, we are working to disseminate as much information regarding the legal aid services to people. I think this is the recommendation from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushama. Smriti, what are your thoughts on this?
Holistic, comprehensive response and support services can only be provided when there is more focus on quality legal aid and not quantity legal aid. To ensure good legal assistance is provided to survivors, it is important that we have better coordination between various departments and referral systems. We need to put in place mechanisms to monitor accountability. That can be done by National Legal Service Aid Authority, District Legal, State Legal Service Aid Authority. We need to invest in better infrastructure, because till now we still see fear among survivors in accessing these spaces. Better coordination and collaboration with civil society organizations for data collection, identification, providing support, trainings, specialized trainings for lawyers, police, court clerks, paralegal volunteers, medical officers, staff of shelter homes, one-stop centers, members of child welfare committees on gender, sexual violence, and intersectionalities. We need to increase diversity by induction of more lawyers from marginalized communities and ensure that there's better representation of caste, gender, and ethnicity. We need to advocate for better remuneration for lawyers. We need to be better prepared for crisis and ensure that there are budgets and better utilization of budgets, increase awareness, as well as ensure that there are speedy trials to set a good precedent, as well as we need to now focus and focus on long-term trauma-informed mental health care for survivors.
Thank you, Kriti. Thank you. And Sashi, I think you've already given us a few recommendations, but please give us what your final recommendation is for the next 5 years. And I think what comes out of all of these recommendations is the fact that there are many. We can't limit it to one, and that's the whole point here, that we need to be looking at the gaps and trying to fill them in the next 5 years. So over to you, Sashi.
I think the most important thing is, in an emergency, framework needs to be in place before, during, and after. Because most of the time, when the emergency situation is over, it's all forgotten about, and until the next one. So I think it's, before, during, and after, and economic empowerment of women, because women suffer a lot, and also they are the ones who are affected, and also they become vulnerable. So in order to prevent, when they become vulnerable, they are succumbed to or vulnerable to violence. So the legal framework and legal aid and protection has to be in place. And also I think one of the most important thing is being transparent and accountable, going beyond survival towards empowering, in order for equal treatment and equal rights. So that is my recommendation.
Thank you, Sashi. On those inspiring words, I'd like to hand this discussion over to Julie, who will take the discussion with the audience forward. Thank you, Julie. Over to you.
Thank you, Shamala, and thank you to all the speakers, Manisha, Shushma, Smriti, and Shashi. I think I will not be able to do justice to this because there's been so much that's been covered. And I'm not too sure whether Manjula is here. Manjula had offered very kindly to take forward the discussion, but unfortunately she's also speaking at a consultation that has been organized by our National Law University. And so she had to miss this session. She was trying to squeeze it in, but she had to miss it, and she did send her apologies. So I'm kind of stepping in for her. I think we do have about 20 minutes. What we would like to do is quickly go through the 2 questions that were asked on the Q&A. I think Naz has been responding to those questions, so I think we have that covered. But we would also want this opportunity where to be given to everyone in case somebody had a burning question or a burning observation to be made. For those who would like to provide more inputs but not really speak here, we would invite you to kind of provide your inputs onto a Jamboard. What we're trying to do is to look at some of the suggestions from your side in terms of how we can take it forward. So I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard on the chat box, and hoping that y'all can access it and you would like to put in your thoughts into it. There are 3 columns. Please feel free to put it wherever you want, and we will organize it. Naz has also been taking some suggestions and trying to put it around in a slide after the main one. So I will stop here, just have a quick look and see if anybody would like to raise their hand, unmute themselves, and ask a question. Have I distracted everybody and asked them to go to the Jamboard? And are you looking at the Jamboard maybe? Okay, somebody has raised their hand. I'm trying to see. Noor Jahan, go ahead. Please unmute yourself and do ask your question. And I hope we would be able to answer the questions you have asked. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. For some reason, I'm not able to see my video, so I don't know whether I'm visible, audible, or I'm audible, right?
Yes, definitely audible.
Yeah. I think the video has some problem. I was not able to see the answers by Naz on the chat box, maybe. So if any one of the speakers could take it up, that would be nice.
Thanks. Nurjan, I think Nurjan has two questions to us. One is, who is responsible at international level to take suo motu actions in situations like Ukraine, Gaza, and even in Afghanistan? And I think Naz has shared a link for Afghanistan here. And it has links to the UN bodies on the situation with violence against women in Afghanistan. But if anybody would like to respond to that question, Noor Jahan's second question is also alternative dispute resolution forums. Like our Legal Aid Center has no recognition from the formal courts. It is possible to formally connect ADRFs to formal courts as complementary systems to each other, especially in India. So I think Naz's response here has been if anybody from India could share their insights, but one point that she has raised here is that usually offenses or crimes against women, which are heinous in nature, such as rape, are not sustainable to compromise or settled out of the court by invoking alternative dispute resolution methods. And in fact, we do have a lot of some of our findings, evidences on compromise being one of the main issues where women, particularly from the marginalized communities, they tend to not give in, but that seems to be a trend that is resorted to. And obviously, we do understand that there are all, power imbalances between the perpetrator, the survivor, and therefore there is always a chance of being threatened, of being coerced into settling, and that really doesn't work as what we would like to call it as an alternative dispute resolution method. So anybody else, any of the panelists would like to or would like to respond to these questions? They are both very tough ones, actually, Noor Jahan. So maybe maybe everybody's hesitating to kind of do that, to provide a proper response to it.
No issues, Julie. It's okay.
Maybe we can also come back to you with more appropriate and well-researched answers on those two. So apologies for not being able to answer that. But if there's anybody else who would like to ask a question, there is somebody else who's raised the hand. Divyangi?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, thank you. Please introduce yourself. Sorry, we didn't ask
Yes.
Noor Jahan. I'll come back to Noor Jahan later. Go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for letting me be a part of this webinar. I am Divyangi. I'm a lawyer and I'm one of the co-founders of the National Council of Women Leaders. And I also work as the program manager at the Zenith Society for Socio-Legal Empowerment, where under the Access to Justice program, we are running 3 legal aid clinics. And we are also working to establish legal aid clinics in law colleges in India. So we are a team of lawyers and paralegals who provide legal support and pro bono services to the marginalized communities in India. and we provide services through direct legal representations, consultations, and we work to build awareness at the grassroots. So right now we primarily work with the Saharia community, which is one of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India. But I'm also keen to, expand the sweep of our services to the issues of women and the issues of sexual violence in particular. So I came to this webinar to learn all the valuable insights that the panelists had to share. And I wanted to ask if we as an organization can also come on board with whatever action plan we develop and explore the possibilities of collaboration and see how we can work together to support the cause.
Thank you, Divyangi. Definitely we could collaborate and try and see how we can. So let us have a chat about it after this webinar is over.
Okay.
Thank you. Noorjahan, do you want to quickly come in and introduce yourself? I did not give you the chance to actually introduce and talk about the work that you do. Noorjahan? Okay, we can ask Noorjahan if she can. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I
please.
just got disconnected. Yeah. So my name is Noor Jahan, and I am from the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, Indian Muslim Women's Movement. And we've been working with Muslim women on legal issues for a very long time, and also other developmental issues. And we've been kind of instrumental in getting the law against triple divorce passed in 2019. But our work on legal aid, community legal aid, has been happening for the last 2.5 decades. And so we run women community-based legal aid centers. So we have paralegals who we have trained on a number of legal issues. And our work gets a little more complicated because Muslim law is not codified. We don't have a law concerning family issues. So we struggle to provide justice in the absence of law. And our community centers also receive a lot of cases of sexual violence. And continuously we work together with the police and the other justice delivery mechanisms. But really sorry to say that our police systems are as bad as they were 3 decades back when we started to work. Still unresponsive, still very discriminatory and misogynist. And the less we say about our formal codes, the better, because as we've already discussed, how formal they are, how expensive they are, and how torturous they are for the victims, for even educated victims to even access it. If Julie allows me, I could share my PhD thesis on how Muslim women's community-based organizations have helped women get justice. This is not pertaining to sexual violences, but family matters. So if you allow me, I can put it in the Q&A. I can put the link to the thesis, if that's okay.
Totally. You please put it in the chat. I think
the chat is disabled, so I'm not able to.
Oh, okay. If okay, you can put it in the Q&A, and we will make sure that it's put in the chat as well. Thank you so much, Noorjahan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I also see Abhirami, your hand is up. Would you like to come in, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful webinar. It gives South Asia perspective very well, the legal aid institution, how do they work. So as I'm associated with All India Dalit Mahila Adhikar Manch, working on Dalit women issue, I could able to see the reflect the same situation, whatever the thing it happens to in the aspect of Dalit women also. So we have a strong legislation which prevents the violence, atrocities against Dalit and the Adivasis, but still the implementation, the scenario is the same. So the thing that whatever the recommendations has come out is good, it looks good. But also we would need to look at the judiciary part of it. What is the situation, keeping the political scenario in mind? Because as we are working to access to justice, which is a basic human rights, but it's accessing it still awareness and other kind of thing is very critical even today. So I feel it's a good to start that kind of interventions. And I would also like to know any critical success story or something for the last 5 years. This is an experience on last 5 years, right? So anything that anyone want to share with the legal aid system, or any new initiatives or some enhanced process, so that it will be a more learning. That I would like to hear from anyone, even India or Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abhirami. Would anybody want to respond to that? Yes, Mr. Zakaban, do you want to come in? Okay.
Right. Thank you very much for inviting me. I have listened to the Bangladesh, Nepal, and India. Rest assured that what I have heard from the pre-eminent speakers, what they have been doing in their countries, I have taken it to myself to see that the things that they have said, I will try and implement those things which we are not implementing, so that most of the things that were said by them are very, very important and very, very practical. I will try to see that what I gathered from this workshop now, this seminar, I will try to implement in Sri Lanka what they have suggested. That is one. And my two Sri Lankan colleagues, I think Shamala knows that I invited her for one of the meetings that we had, the Legal Aid Commission, where we had a meeting of all the sister organizations. We try to have a sort of a network of all sister organizations. And unfortunately, on that particular day, I think she came to India to attend one of your seminars. I'm re-inviting her to attend that. I'm also inviting the other colleague, the Sri Lankan colleague, so that because of the fact that she's in Sri Lanka, I'm having another meeting because we are where the Legal Aid Commission of Sri Lanka is concerned. We want to have a network of what I call the like-minded or sister associations. The people, like the Human Rights Commission, like the Child Victims Authority, like the national. We have a National Child Protection Authority and the Human Rights Commission and the Police Authority, and the prisons. We all get together and to see whether how we can proceed further. So we are in the process of doing that. And lastly, I would say that as I started early, as I said, that well, we have conferences, we agree to disagree, sometimes we disagree to agree, all that. What I always say is that something must be carried forward. I'm inviting your organization, maybe the Sri Lankan representative of your organization that is in Sri Lanka, to come and visit us and look at how we work and give us some guidelines and what suggestions they have, so that I can carry it forward. I can carry it through the ministry and the other authorities concerned, so that we are here to learn. I learned a lot from India, from Bangladesh, Nepal, what they are doing. Bangladesh, I have found that they have gone a step further. Without only providing legal assistance, they go further and see whether they can give financial assistance, as I heard. So that, of course, I don't think we will be able to do, but that's a good thing if you can. But little things that I've learned, I will try to implement. And all but the three speakers from the three countries, we also have. We conduct workshops, we have these hotlines, we work, we sort of have a paralegals. All those things are there in Sri Lanka also. So rest assured that we will try to get together and see that good service is provided. But I will also go back to the first two speakers who spoke at length. of the concept of this. The concept must be worked out. That is why I say to you, I'm inviting you or your organization to come and through your representative, maybe in Sri Lanka, or your organization to come and see how it works and then give us suggestions so that we can improve ourselves. That assurance I can give. In fact, I have emailed to you our National Child Protection Authority Act, the Victims of Crime Act, and the Domestic Violence Act. We have all the acts are there in Sri Lanka, but as I said earlier, it's a case of implementation and enforcement, which I still say, although I am the chairman, it's not all that good. So we need support from your side, sort of press upon us, and so that I can take it forward with the authorities concerned. That's what I want to emphasize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sahabandhu. I think that's commitment from our government representatives, and so we will be definitely in touch with you to try and take this forward. As you have said, this is just the start. I mean, the whole idea is to really work together after this. So I think Shamla had posed a question to us, to me, the hosts and the panelists, and I responded to everybody to say that we will be working on a report. We are hoping that we'd be able to have it ready by the beginning of next year. I think this year is really going to be like November, December, everybody gets busy with the 16 days of activism. And so by January, February, we're hoping that we'd be having a report, which we would like to share with everybody, and then try and have some kind of a exchange. I'm not too sure how we will have that exchange, but definitely an exchange to see how we can engage at the national, regional, and if there is appetite at the international level as well. We are also in the process of trying to see how we can expand the membership. There's no formal membership right now. We are just a small group of organizations who have come together under this whole banner of the South Asia Partnership to End Sexual Violence. So we will try and see if we can open it up to organizations who are represented here who would like to be part of it, and to see if there is scope to engage on this further. Just responding to Abhirami's question, hopefully the report will also look at more innovative aspects that were covered here and maybe beyond as well. So I'm mindful of the fact that we are at the end of the half an hour, 1.5 hours that we had slotted for this webinar. And so I'll just say a quick thanks. This whole process would not have been possible without having a lot of people, a lot of guidance, support, and patience from a lot of people, organizations, their representatives here. So I would like to quickly just acknowledge everybody, in the ideation and the execution of this webinar. I think Urja Trust, BLAST, FWLD, Uran, Center for Equality and Justice, and others who have chosen to remain in the background, NCWL. Thank you, a big thank you to all the speakers who have really stuck to time. So thank you very much for making that effort, being mindful of the fact that it is just an hour and a half. So all the moderators, there have been, we will not be able to do justice to capture the breadth, the depth, and the insights from everybody. Hopefully we'll be able to do that in the report. So a big thank you to Ankita, Naz, Mr. Sahabandhu, Ms. Upriti, who was not able to be here, but still made the time to send a recorded intervention. Shamala, Manisha, Smriti, Shushma, Shashi, and Manjula. I think there are some colleagues who are here who have been working behind the scenes and have supported this webinar. So I just quickly wanted to give a shout out to Shruti, Stella, Faria, Jackie, and I think a colleague of Mr. Sahabandhu who kind of coordinated everything. So Miss Rizna Nabila, thank you very much. I think a big thank you to all the members in the audience who stayed, who took the time out, and who have given their contribution to this webinar. And it is really a big thanks to all of you, the energy that we get from you. So with the commitment that this is not the end, but this is a start, thank you very much for attending. Hopefully we shall be in touch in the new year, and we will come together to work on this issue, engage on this, and bring more people into this conversation. So a big thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you to the team over there as well for organizing this so beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sahabandhu, for saying yes.
Yes. Thank you. A big thank you to sir.
I invite you to so that you can express what you said here at that network meeting. Please do join.
I'm sorry, I couldn't actually hear.
No, Shama, I said that we are having a network program that I invited you last time, you couldn't come. So I'm inviting you now. I'll send you an invitation and you come with our other Sri Lankan colleague so that we can move forward and see what we can do, what we have learned from this workshop.
Definitely, Mr. Sahabandhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.